Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com here with a June 1st Hour of Devastation spoiler video, which I think was not supposed to happen. These were spoiled quote-unquote accidentally, just showing us that Wizards, again, has a hard time keeping a tight lid on their spoiler cards or their upcoming sets, as we saw the Commander card spoiled earlier this month, and now, or back in May, and now we're seeing some Hour of Devastation, which is pretty early. Usually it's about 3 weeks before a set is released that we start to see a lot of the spoilers. And these ones are really ones that they like to showcase or do a whole huge like spoiler hype around them. So yeah, I don't know. We've seen Wizards do this in the past because accidental spoilers seem to be hyped up a lot more than on purpose, so it could just be a genius move by Wizards marketing to get the discussion going about Hour of Devastation, and otherwise kind of boring time in Magic, as the summer months are definitely when Magic is at its lowest. So I'm going to talk briefly, we're going to go actually backwards here, and talk about the one that I'm not the most excited about, and then talk about the Mythics. But this is a good one as well. Bontu's Last Reckoning is very, very interesting because we haven't seen a lot of 3-mana, like hard removal or hard board wipe spells printed. Usually they're very situational, look like Radiant Flames or Sweltering Suns. But Bontu's Last Reckoning just destroys all creatures for 3 mana, and the downside of it is lands you control do not untap during their next untap phase. I think this is incredibly powerful right now in Standard because this is the turn that you want to be wiping the board versus zombies. This is the turn that Diregraph Colossus comes out and the tokens start to breed out of control, or the Crypt Breaker is going to start drawing cards. So if they have gone wide into Bontu's Last Reckoning, you can wipe the board on turn 3 and really stop that massive turn 4 swing. Same thing with like Red Green Energy or Humans or even Mardu. That is a very, very good turn to be wiping the board. Bontu's Last Reckoning, though, is really got to think of this as spending 6 mana into it because it's making your lands not untap on their next untap step. But I don't know if Control really cares at this point. So where I've really identified where decks would like this is I think the Ishkanah curves very well with Bontu's Last Reckoning. So if you turn one, use something like a Traverse the Ulvenwald. I guess that's a sorcery, but if we put like an instant speed in the graveyard or Evolving Wilds in the graveyard on turn number 1, and then turn number 2, we put something else on the battlefield, maybe a creature that then will die that gives us value. Right now, I don't know if there is a creature that does want to do that, but then on turn number 4, you cast a sorcery, or turn number 3, you cast a sorcery, and if you have land, instant, sorcery, creature in the graveyard, then turn number 5, your lands untap and you can cast Ishkanah and then really have the board state because you cleared that early aggro and now you have the late game presence. So I don't know if that's too much of a drawback. We'll have to wait and see where this happens, but I like it in kind of like a Torrential Gearhulk black-blue control shell. I like it in black-white control as you're going to be, setting up your own board. And then on turn number 3, wiping theirs, and then on turn number 5, you can drop a huge bomb to then really stabilize. And your opponent's not going to do a lot so you're on their turn 4, they can cast something. Your turn 4, you pass. Turn 5, they can cast something, and then your turn 5, that's where hopefully you'll have your game plan to be greater than what their game plan is. So I really do like this as an answer to those, hyper aggressive strategies, especially zombies. This is a key tool for that. Modern is kind of sweet too, because Modern, you do need to wipe the board early, and sometimes the cards like the Day of Judgment / Wrath of God / Damnation are just too late for Modern. And now maybe a 3-mana spell is exactly what we need. I mean, it feels like what's the 0-mana spell that then you have to pay the 3 mana during your upkeep, the Slaughter Pact. This kind of feels like that. So it is taking a turn. It is effectively kind of time walking you, giving your opponent an extra turn. But against those decks that are trying to go all in, that is a very, very pivotal turn 3 play. And it's the reason why the Day of Judgment's probably too powerful for Standard, and Fumigate's just kind of meh. And I think that this is going to be underrated as far as how much play it's going to see, and how that lands you control not untapping might not affect as much as we'd think. So I'm looking forward to this as an answer to those type of all-in strategies. The next card is Samut the Tested, which is a 4-mana Planeswalker that has some kind of difficult to tell how these abilities are going to impact Standard. So its +1 ability is one creature, up to one creature you control gets double strike. The problem is on turn number 4, it's just off curve. Really, your creatures start to get really good on turn number 4 and turn number 5. The best on what red-green is doing right now is like Electrostatic Pummeler, but giving double strike is not very good because you need the mana to then pump the Electrostatic Pummeler. So maybe at turn 5, this could work out well. So you bring down Samut, clear some blockers, and then turn 5 have some mana. But I mean, the Pummeler is already doing well there. It's the same converted mana cost as Bristling Hydra, so Bristling Hydra and this are kind of awkward. We've seen that with Arlen Cord being 4, with a lot of things you want to be doing on turn 4 is not called Arlen Cord. So I think Samut's going to fall under the same the problems that Arlen Cord has. Speaking of which, Samut is directly competing with Arlen Cord, and their abilities are very, very similar. Their +1 is pumping a creature, and then the Arlen can put out a werewolf, then flip and start to have control. So Samut can actually control the board immediately. And it can divide 2 damage, which is really good versus like humans. For example, you can kill off Toolcraft Exemplars, you can kill off Thopter tokens, you can kill off like a Rogue Refiner or 2 zombies if they run out 2 zombies. But where this card does shine is its ultimate is Tooth and Nail. So you can search your library for up to 2 creatures and or planeswalkers and put them on the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So it is like another way to get the Emrakul and the Xenagos on the battlefield and then just win. And back in like in Frontier, you have a couple of 2-card combos, so it does get interesting there. But in Standard, I'm not sure if we have any like 2-card combos immediately that work, synergize that well. Maybe like Omnoth. Is anything like brings in a bunch of lands like a Primeval Titan type ability? That'd be kind of cool with Samut to Ultimate, but it doesn't cast them, so Ulamog gets kind of weird. A lot of things that do have enter the battlefield effects, though. It can go get the Eldrazi, the 4 mana or the 6 mana Eldrazi, as well as the Elder Deep Fiend. Or not Elder Deep Fiend, the Eldrazi Displacer, for example. It can get that combo. And I'm sure that there's some other combos that I haven't quite identified that are really, really powerful. So basically where I like Samut is in the Teamer Energy strategy that already uses a bunch of Planeswalkers. Because what you do with the Teamer strategy is you just try to completely clog the board with Whirler Virtuoso and Rogue Refiners and sort of the conduit type tokens, and then if you tick up, then the -7 can go get a 2-card combination that isn't too tough to. So maybe even putting this in as we've already identified, the 2-card Eldrazi combo, putting in that type of shell would be pretty sweet. Other than you do still have to have something to do with the infinite loop that is created by the Brood Monitor and the Eldrazi Displacer. So you'd have to have some other card that is getting, or like an Anointed Procession to have unlimited tokens, or Panharmonicon already out for that. But I think that there is merit to testing that type of ability. Like I said, any Eldrazi token-based strategy that clogs up the board can easily tick up Samut to the point where it's ready to ult. And I think this is a pretty interesting card. I don't think it's just kind of a duh card like Gideon that's like, oh my god, that's just like a busted ability. I'm going to play it in every deck. It's going to warp the format. This is a card that has to have a lot of building around to really find where it works. Now on to Nicol Bolas, the God-Pharaoh, which I am not very excited about because I think that we need a Marvel ban. And I called this. I've been saying when Nicol Bolas is going to be a 7 or an 8 mana Planeswalker, and it's going to have some busted abilities. It's not quite as busted as the last Nicol Bolas, but all of the abilities are very, very relevant. And I think it actually gets really good in the mirror for the Aetherworks Marvel because it's +2. Target opponent exiles the top card of his library until they exile a non-land card. And then you can cast it without paying its mana. So you can hit a Ulamog off of Nicol Bolas, or hit a Marvel, or hit something, a Chandra, something that is really, really powerful. And it's +2 ability, so it's like a draw card on crack. It's a draw and cast a card. So it has sort of like a Gonti type ability to it. And then if you tick it up twice, then you can wipe the board if you do run Dark Imitations. If you tick it up 3 times, then you can wipe the board and still have a Planeswalker out. But I don't think its -12 ability is that relevant. I think that it's better controlling without the -12, and it doesn't hit land, so your opponent can always just come back at that point. But its +1 ability is incredibly good too, because chewing up your opponent hands 2 cards out of your opponent's hand is very, very powerful, especially then you do it on the turn it comes out, and then the next turn do it again. You've effectively got rid of 4 cards out of your opponent. And at that point, I don't know if they're going to be able to come back. The -4 is also pretty relevant, because if you immediately +2, then you can use the -4 twice in a row, doing 14 damage to an opponent, taking care of 2 threats. A lot of things can't come back from 14 damage. It feels very similar to Ulamog in that aspect, that just a few turns, Ulamog is going to win the game. So why I don't like this, though, with Aetherix Marvel is now we have like a problem that's going to exist with the remainder of Aetherix Marvel's life in Standard. And this is what broke Emrakul, is you could hardcast Emrakul, or you could just roll the dice with Aetherix Marvel and hit it. And so a turn 4 Nicol Bolas, is there many decks that can come back from this? And I'm going to say no, because even zombies, like if you turn 4 it, say you have like a Rogue Refiner out, or a Whirler Virtuoso, they can also clog the board. If you've effectively chewed up their hand, then it's taken away what they're trying to do later on with zombies. If they have like a Liliana's Mastery in hand, it's gone now as they've unloaded their hand. And then it's just a few tick ups after that to just start getting so much value that it's going to be too hard to come back from. Against control-based decks, if you hit a Nicol Bolas, and then you can start hitting their own Torrential Gearhulks, you can start hitting their removal spells like their own Harness Lightnings with that +2, and then you have that huge threat of 9 loyalty. It's almost a player at that point. Very, very tough to attack into, or very tough to control. So I just think that there's going to be, it is going to be a fair card if you're going to end up casting it or using the Oracle's Vault to cast it. But with Aetherix Marvel, it's just too good. And Aetherix Marvel already at 38% of the metagame, I think that people are going to go away from Ulamog and just try to run Nicol Bolas. I think it's that good, being able to hard cast the Nicol Bolas or spin the Marvel and find it. And there's just no point to an Ulamog at that point. Ulamog is going to be relegated back to either one over the sideboard or a combination of these, and we might see going back to the Servant of the Conduit builds, as they can then, and the old school or the new school Chandra rather than the old school Chandra, as the new Chandra can then curve really well with Nicol Bolas on turn 4 or even turn 3 with the Servant of the Conduit, and then on the next turn tick up for 2 mana and have enough lands or / Servant of the Conduit, just hard cast Nicol Bolas. So that's my thoughts on Nicol Bolas. We'll have to wait and see what other cards kind of enable this card. But Marvel is just becoming too much of a problem. Clear back in my spoiler video, the minute that Marvel was spoiled, I said that it was too good for Standard. Now we're actually starting to see that that's the case, especially with a lot of the ways they've banned a lot of the cards that were better than the Marvel strategy, like the Reflector Mage, like the Smuggler's Copter, and now the Felidar Guardian. That's what it kind of is rough for Wizards. They're kind of in a damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario, because inevitably if you ban a strategy, it just might make the next strategy down. And what we were starting to see before, I mean, they emergency banned Felidar Guardian, but Felidar Guardian was number 1. Mardu was number 2 just because it could actually compete with Felidar Guardian. But slipping up, slowly coming in contention, the number 3 deck was Marvel. And it's because it could do things just as degenerate as the Felidar Guardian combo. And now we've seen it has, like I said, a 38% and still ticking up slowly. Maybe in a week or two, it'll be up to 45% of the metagame is going to be Marvel-based decks. And I think that if anything ever has over a third, that is just too backbreaking for a format to be healthy. And so, I don't know. I think we can't just rely now on Ulamog rotating out. This could be just too much for the format. So, anywho, yeah, it is a 7 mana. Why was I thinking this is another 8 mana spell? So, but anywho, let me know what you think in the comment section below about the Nicol Bolas. It is creating some excitement for Hour of Devastation. Still over a month away before the set is released, but we've seen some good things so far. What would you like to see out of Hour of Devastation? I would like to see, some mid-range get some help again. I just think that we're in a strategy that is just too all in, and I really like decks that are where mid-range is the go-to type strategy, where actually you play a lot of games or a lot of turns of Magic back and forth, cat and mouse with your opponent, a lot of removal, and that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see some pretty decent creatures in the mid-range slot, and I'd also like to see some pretty decent control in the mid-range spot. Anyway, this has been Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com. Thanks for watching.